Hello everyone, welcome to another interesting and informative session of the Analyst brought to you by Vajiram and Ravi. In today's session, we'll discuss 7 important topics as featured in the Hindu and Indian Express for your comprehensive understanding of the current affairs explained to you in the easiest language possible. The topics are as follows. From your analysis section, in the first topic, we'll try to assess the health insurance prevalence in India as well as the workability of the Ayushman Bharat scheme. Then, in the second topic, we'll try to assess the issues which are prevailing between India and China, specifically in the context of line of actual control. Then, from your prelims pointer, we'll take up 5 news, where we'll not only try to simplify the news for you, but also provide you the much important value addition, keeping in mind the approaching prelims 2026. So, stay tuned. The latest National Sample Survey data of the 8th round on household social consumption related to the healthcare sector actually reveals concerning results about the health insurance prevalence in our country. The issue which forms an important component of your GS2 paper under the larger theme of government policies and acts. So let's first try to assess that what this data about the health insurance penetration among the Indians tells us about how this healthcare sector has actually started hurting the wallet of the common man of the country. So first let's try to assess this specific table. It tells us that how, even though the insurance penetration among the Indians is significantly increasing in the last decade, they are not availing that much of benefits specifically from the hospitals. The limited gains in the hospital use and the rising expenses despite a surge which has taken place in the various insurance schemes. So for example, there were 37, so let's say for example out of 1000 people, there were 37 people who were basically being hospitalized in the year of 2014. However, 10 years down the line, almost a decade later, there are only 29 out of 1000 people who are actually using hospitals for various kind of healthcare related services. So first thing, we can say that the hospitalization among the Indians has actually significantly declined in the last decade. Despite the increasing insurance coverage, it has not translated obviously to the utilization of the hospital care. At the same point of time, if we have to prove that yes, indeed, the insurance penetration has significantly increased, we can basically quote this data according to which 47% of the rural people and 44% of the urban households are actually now under coverage of the various health insurance scheme. One thing which you guys shall note from the perspective of the prelims examination is that the larger amount of rural population is covered under the various health insurance scheme in comparison to the urban population. So why this thing is, this kind of a very rare phenomena is taking place? Because keep this in mind that a large share of poor population actually still resides in the rural areas. And this poor population is actually covered in various government financed health insurance schemes. Like for example, your Pradhan Mantri Jan Arogya Yojana, which we are going to discuss further in the session. So, because majority of the people, poor people, they actually reside in rural areas and they are covered under various government health insurance schemes as well as state health insurance schemes, it is obvious that the number of people who are covered under these health insurance schemes, they have a larger share in the rural areas. Also keep this in mind that the government financed health insurance, right, the coverage of that, the amount of people it covers under the basket has actually increased by almost 2.5 times. And such government finance health insurance schemes also includes your employees state insurance scheme as well as the central government health insurance scheme or security schemes, etc. Now, let's try to analyze the second table. The second table tells us about the share of the public sector hospitals in the total number of hospitalized people. So let's say that in the rural area, there were approximately 34 people who used to get hospitalized in the year of 2040. This number has now come down to 27, right, in the year of 2025. Out of these 27 people, the number of people who are now availing healthcare insurance or healthcare services in the government hospital is only 39% of it. Earlier, it was 41%. So despite increase in the insurance which has taken place, the insurance penetration, the number of people who are availing the healthcare facility in the hospital. That has not significantly improved, first thing. Second thing, the people who are actually even availing these government hospital services, their share in the government hospitals or the public sector hospital has actually remained stagnant in the rural area as well as in the urban area, where it has remained stagnant to only 32% of the total number of patients. So out of 100 patients in the region of urban areas, only 32 people actually end up availing the government healthcare sector, and thus there is a greater proportion of the population which is actually moving towards the private sector. What can be the causes for that? So, first and foremost is obviously the poor health infrastructure which prevails in our country, where there exists the lack of government medical facilities. For example, just look at the data which has been provided to us by the Rural Health Statistics of 2021, which was published in the year of 2023, according to which there was almost a shortfall of more than 1,000 rural primary health centers, almost shortfall of 17,000 rural community health centers. Even in the urban areas, there was a significant shortfall of 537 urban primary health center. So it's very obvious that, let's say for example, if I'm living in an urban area and I want to go to the government hospital, the first prerequisite requirement of that is the existence of a good health infrastructure in that region. The second is the skewed doctor to the patient ratio which exists. For example, the World Health Organization basically recommends that for every 1,000 number of people, there shall be existence of at least one specialist doctor. However, as per the data which has been provided to us by the Niti Aayog, in our country, there exists one such specialist doctor for almost 1,834 people. So overall, almost 67% or 2 by 3rd sanctioned post of a specialist at the various community healthcare centers in our country, they actually remain vacant. So can we establish from these three data that yes, indeed there exists a poor healthcare infrastructure in our country? What the government is required to do under the directives of Article 47. What Article 47 says, it is nothing but a directive principle of state policy. It directs the government to basically significantly improves the standard of living for people and thus to invest in public health. So the government had basically envisaged a national health policy of 2017, according to which the government had set a kind of an ambitious target for itself that it is going to increase the healthcare expenditure as a percentage of GDP up to 2.5%. What has been the government's response recently? For continuous number of years, it has actually remained less than 2% of the GDP. And we have not been able to achieve this target set by National Health Policy of 2017 even once. So it is obvious that considering there exists poor healthcare infrastructure and an abysmal response or apathy by the government, it is very obvious that a larger proportion of population is actually moving towards the private healthcare sector to actually avail good healthcare. And that is exactly what has been established as a phenomena called as privatization of healthcare, where the highlight of the report is, where it actually majorly argues that there has been a considerable reduction in the use of public institutions for various hospitalization and childbirth cases. Just look at the data here. 57% of the people were actually enrolled under the various government finance healthcare insurance initiatives. They actually are now seeking private healthcare. They are actually trying to go to the private hospitals. Why? Because in public hospitals, they are basically facing the issues of unavailability of medicine, diagnostic services, the lack of specialist doctor which exist. Thus, the average hospitalization expense, if we compare, let's say if I am going to avail a kind of an organ transplant, so I am first and foremost trying to go to AIIMS hospital, right? The flagship hospital of the government. When I'm going there, let's say the cost of that is 10 rupees, right? Just assume for a moment. If I want to avail the same organ transplant and I am now going to any private hospital, the same cost will almost end up increasing by almost 70 to 80%. Thus, even despite being covered under various such insurance schemes where their healthcare shall be subsidized by the government, following the directive of the Article 47 of the Constitution, the average out-of-pocket expenditure which is incurred by the people is almost 31,250 rupees in the rural areas and 34,000 and above in the urban areas. Thus, as per the data which has been provided to us by the World Health Organization, this out-of-pocket expenditure almost amounts to 50 to 60% of the health cost, and thus plays a very pivotal role in the further exacerbation of the vicious cycle of poverty. In fact, the today's article claims that all these various insurance schemes which is being provided by the government, only 13% of such insurance schemes benefit actually reaches to the poorest who are in the most dire need of it. So, considering these issues, what has been the response of the government? For that purpose, we will be required to learn about the flagship scheme of the government, that is Pradhan Mantri Jan Arogya Yojana or Ayushman Bharat, which is, remember, first and foremost, is a centrally sponsored scheme, where the government says that we are going to provide 5 lakh rupees per family per year. So if it's a centrally sponsored scheme, the expenditure cost is basically shared between the central and the state government. The ratio is 60 to 40 for the normal state, and for any hilly state or northeastern state, the sharing cost is 90:10. When the government is saying that we are going to provide an insurance coverage of 5 lakh rupees per family per year, it is going to be provided for specifically secondary and tertiary healthcare. What is secondary healthcare? In secondary healthcare, let's say for example, you are going for any kind of diagnosis, like for example, X-ray or ultrasound. So that cost will be covered by the government. Then let's say for example, if you go to the doctor and doctor suggests for any kind of surgeries, so even that surgery cost will be included. Or for example, in tertiary healthcare, where you are actually required to be recommended to an expert. So let's say for example, you are suffering, right, from a heartbreak, and for that purpose you are required to refer to a cardiologist. Even that cost will be covered under this insurance scheme. And let's say if that cardiologist basically suggests you that you will be required to go through an organ transplant to basically change your heart altogether because you are unable to forget that one person, even that cost is covered. Now, to actually get this organ transplant treatment, can I go only to a public hospital like AIIMS? Nahi. I can also go to any private hospital as well if that private hospital is impaneled under the Ayushman Bharat scheme. Now keep this in mind that through this scheme, the government is basically trying to cater to the healthcare need of the bottom 40% of the income quintile of our country, the poorest of the poorest. And for that purpose, the identification is done using the socio-economic caste census of 2011. One more salient feature: there exists no restriction at all on the family size and the gender, as well as there is an application of a family floater basis. What is family floater basis? So let's say for example, I am suffering from an incurable disease, that is love, right? And for that purpose, I am basically going through a treatment in an hospital, for which the total amount of cost per year is going to be around 3 lakh rupees. But the total corpus which is being provided to me by the government is 5 lakh rupees. So there is still a remaining corpus of 2 lakh rupees, and that can be availed by any family member of mine. So that is a family floater basis, as well as it also tries to cater to the demand of migrants, and for that purpose there exists a kind of an interstate operability be as well. The nodal agency on the behalf of Ministry of Health and Family Welfare, which implements the scheme at the grassroots level, is your National Health Authority, which, keep in mind, is an autonomous organization which has been created under the Society Registration Act of 1860, and thus, keep this in mind, it is a non-statutory body which has not been created under the provisions of the scheme, that is Ayushman Bharat. Also, to actually prevent various kind of fraudulent cases which has emerged in Ayushman Bharat, there is National Anti-Fraud Unit as well. Another question which can appear as a statement in prelims examination: what kind of expenses are covered under this 5 lakh rupees per family per year? The first is the medical examination as well as the consultation charges, right, which is basically charged for you when you go to visit the doctor. The second is the pre-hospitalization cost. Let's say for example, if you are required to go through the diagnostic process, X-ray, ultrasound, etc. So such pre-hospitalization cost is actually covered up to 3 days. And then there is also a coverage of post-hospitalization cost up to 15 days after your operation has been done. In fact, all the charges under ICUs, as well as if there is a medical implantation required, such as an organ transplant, even that is covered under Ayushman Bharat. Keep this in mind that from the year of fiscal year 2022, if UPSC says in a statement that there has been a consistent increase in the allocation for the Ayushman Bharat scheme, that statement would be considered as false, because there is no such trend which you guys can see from this specific graph. So, all these issues which are prevailing, the privatization of healthcare which is taking place, the government came up with a flagship scheme, that is Ayushman Bharat, where the government is saying that, okay, if you want, we are basically going to cover you under the health insurance. We are targeting the bottom 40% of the income quintile of the population, and such treatment can be availed not only in the government hospital but also in the private hospitals as well. But even in this scheme, there exist several loopholes and challenges. The first and foremost is the frauds and the abuse of the various salient features of the scheme which has taken place at the grassroots level. The first and foremost is the treatment of the dead patients. So, as you guys know, that I was suffering from an incurable disease, and so I ended up dying in 3 days. But various such government hospitals as well as private hospitals, what they end up doing, that they keep treating me, treating my soul now, for the remaining, let's say 3 days or 4 days, and keep me under the intensive care unit without actually informing my family and my parents. And thus they actually end up generating a lot of such fake bills, and thus they are extorting this money, right, from the government on the account of Ayushman Bharat. Keep this in mind, that at the end of the day, that money is being paid by the taxpayers, which are nothing but you people. Second, various fake registration cases has emerged. So for example, many of the fraudulents, what they have kind of devised a mechanism to further extort the money is that, let's say for example, there is a person. This person has got an Aadhaar card which is linked with a mobile number, and this person basically falls in the category of that bottom 40% income quintile. So this person is basically a beneficiary under the Ayushman Bharat scheme. On the name of this one person who is a beneficiary, various such fake accounts and Aadhaar cards has been created, generating on the very same mobile number, and thus availing the benefits under the Ayushman Bharat, for which at the end of the day the sum is being provided by the government. So there was basically a very interesting CAG report which highlighted the curious case of this specific number. Just make a guess how many fake accounts was created on this one number, the number which was basically linked with an Aadhaar card, the Aadhaar card which was supposed to be the beneficiary under the Aadhaar card scheme, under the Ayushman Bharat scheme. More than 7.5 lakh accounts or beneficiaries under Ayushman Bharat was generated under this very same mobile number as per the CAG report. Just look at the data here, the troubled life of Ayushman Bharat. This particular data belongs to the year of 2024, according to which 39.5 lakh claims has been made without any Aadhaar or biometric authentication more than once. To actually settle these claims, the government has ended up paying 1,679 crore rupees. Almost 7 crore is the amount of money which has been paid as claims in the name of the patient who already died in the previous hospital visits. Many of the time, the size of the household which is actually kind of put on the paper by the government officials at the grassroots level, who are obviously working in the collusion with such fraudulents, that is completely unrealistic size of the household. In fact, so all these leukemas which are prevailing in the government hospital, it has actually led to the private hospital taking over the functions of these public hospital. For example, let's say I am a poor person, right? You don't have to imagine, because I am poor. And let's say I migrate from the region, right, of let's say the state of Bihar or the state of Tamil Nadu or the state of Kerala, and I move to the region of Delhi. Why? Because I want a good healthcare treatment in AIIMS hospital. But the moment I reach AIIMS, first and foremost, there is a huge crowd on the gate itself. I am asking them what is happening. They are saying there is a shortage of doctor, there is shortage of hospital beds, there is shortage of various kind of diagnostic services or various kind of advanced healthcare equipments. And because of which they are telling me that there is only a waiting period of 3 months even to meet the doctor. So in that case, I have run out of the options and I will start looking towards a private hospital. That is the best I can do. When I go to this private hospital now, who are basically taking slowly over the functions of the government hospitals, as we can see from the today's data itself, these private hospitals, majority of them has basically converted them into a 7-star hotels, where they actually end up charging hefty charges, as we saw that the cost of the same service in the private sector actually ends up increasing by 70 to 80%. So because of that, even in these private hospitals, even if you end up sneezing by mistake, they will end up actually kind of making a hefty bill of that, just some personal experiences. So don't you think there exists a kind of an entire systematic failure? Another problem which has emerged is that, let's say for example, I went and I availed myself the same treatment under Ayushman Bharat in a private hospital. Do I have a list where I can actually go and access that which hospital is impaneled under Ayushman Bharat or not? The answer is no. So first and foremost, I avail the treatment. After giving me the treatment, these hospitals are telling me that, you know what, we are not registered under Ayushman Bharat, and thus you are required to pay 7 lakh rupees now. And I am coming from a kind of a very poor economic background, from the bottom 40% income quintile. How I am basically able to supposed to pay that amount? As per the Ministry of Health itself, there exists no single database for the private hospitals yet. Then why I am required to move to this private healthcare at the first place? Because of the overburdened secondary and the tertiary infrastructure. Many of the times, even these hospitals, if you guys can see, private hospitals pull back on Ayushman Bharat amid the low state funding. So many of such private hospitals who were impaneled under Ayushman Bharat, even they have registered themselves out. Why? Because many of the time they are not provided timely payment by the government itself. Let's say for example, if the central government has transferred its share, there is a lukma which is prevailing with the transfer of the state government. So because of such delay in payments and settlements which takes place, many of the private hospitals actually realize that, because they obviously work on the profit maximization theory, so they realize that it is not profitable for them, not workable for them, so they started moving out. One another issue is that, let's say for example, if I am coming from a bottom 40% income quintile and I went to a government hospital itself, let's say for example AIMS, and I started availing the treatment. But because of the complex issue which was prevailing within my body, it was realized that the total amount of health expenditure, right, would come around 7 lakh rupees. Now, 5 lakh rupees of that is actually covered under Ayushman Bharat. But what about the remaining 2 lakh rupees? Again, I cannot afford it. So what happens after 5 lakh rupees? Even that remains an issue. Thus, what are some innovative steps which has been taken by the government? First and foremost, the government has also come up with various health insurance initiatives for various sectors, like for example, Aam Aadmi Bima Yojana, where you can actually pay an yearly 200 rupees and you can get up 30,000 rupees in the coverage. Then there is Awaj Health Insurance Scheme, which aims towards interstate workers in Kerala without any medical coverage. Then your Pradhan Mantri Jan Arogya under Ayushman Bharat, where we are already covering 5 lakh rupees per year. Pradhan Mantri Suraksha Bima Yojana, which actually covers accidental death and disability payments. Then for specifically providing such healthcare initiatives to the various mothers in our country, there exists your Matra Vandana Yojana as well. Then the government also recently has following the Sustainable Development Goal Principle of 3.8, which actually aims to provide universal health coverage by the year of 2030. The government has expanded the ambit of insurance under Ayushman Bharat, where now all the senior citizens, keep this in mind, all senior citizens. So let's say for example, even your Ambanis, Adanis, if they will become more than 70 years old, even then, irrespective of the income qualification here, and above, irrespective of the income bar, are now covered under Ayushman Bharat scheme. Then in the budget 2025, there was an announcement which was made by the finance minister, according to which 1 crore gig workers are now going to receive health insurance at more than 25,000 plus impaneled hospitals in the country. So these are some innovative steps which has been taken by the government of India very recently. But it's very obvious that we are required for the further stricter implementation and actions by your national anti-fraud unit to actually deal with these fraudulent cases which are taking place. Also, further timely dissemination of the funds by the state and the central government shall be done to these private hospitals. At the same point of time, the infrastructure updation by increasing the further percentage share of GDP of the healthcare, that shall be done, and these innovative steps will actually help us to further increase the insurance availability for the larger section of the population. Keep all of these points in your mind when you are writing this answer, and we move forward to the next news, where we'll discuss about the Shanghai Cooperation Organization. Why? Because our Defense Minister Rajnath Singh and his Chinese counterpart discussed the issue of line of actual control on the sidelines of Shanghai Cooperation Organization's Defense Minister meeting, which is taking place where? In Bishkek, Kyrgyzstan on Tuesday. The issue which forms an important component of your GS2 paper under the larger theme of international relations. So what is the context of the news? The two sides discuss maintaining peace and tranquility along the line of actual control and exchange views on the broader regional security issues, including the West Asia situation which is taking place. So keep this in mind that SCO has actually emerged as a very lucrative alternative for us thanks to the downturn of ties which has taken place between India and the Western world, specifically on two important accounts. The first is obviously the case of USA, where it has basically indulged in various kind of tariff imposition on various products of India. The second is obviously with European Union, where it is also following a kind of a trade protectionist policy and putting a various kind of trade barriers. For example, you guys might be very frequently reading about something called as carbon border adjustment mechanism. So if we want to basically increase our trade with the Central Asian region, which is also very, minerally rich, the minerally rich region which is very strategic for our industrial development, then it is very important for us to actually increase and strengthen our ties with the Shanghai Cooperation Organization, which is a Eurasian, political, economic and international security organization, which was established in the year of 2001, and keep this in mind, our country joined it in 2017. Thus, is India a founding member of Shanghai Cooperation Organization? The statement will be incorrect. The importance of Shanghai Cooperation Organization can also be established by its various economic usefulness to our country. Like for example, it covers almost 24% of the total geographical area of the world. It amounts to 42% of the population, which has a high propensity to consume and thus can act as a very interesting market for our products, as well as has a good purchasing power capacity, which is reflected that these countries basically amounts to almost 1/4 of the GDP of the world. However, keep this in mind that the official language of Shanghai Cooperation Organization is only Russian and Chinese, and any Indian language is not part of it. Also keep this in mind that unlike various other organizations, does there exist any permanent headquarter of Shanghai Cooperation Organization? The answer to that question is no. So when we are talking about the Shanghai Cooperation Organization, keep this in mind that it is a 10-member organization. The members which you guys can see here: Russia, China, Kazakhstan, Kyrgyzstan, India, your Pakistan, Iran, etc. So from the prelims perspective, we can actually create a mnemonics which will be easier to recall in a pressure-like situation. Like for example, Ru, Ka, Ta, China. Who is waiting? China. For what? So if China is waiting, don't you think it is going to be Uz, Ki, Pain? Russia, Kazakhstan, Tajikistan, China, Uzbekistan, Kyrgyzstan, Pakistan and India. Also, keep this in mind, Iran joined as a country in 2023 and Belarus ended up joining in the year of 2024, and thus Belarus became the first European nation to actually join Shanghai Cooperation Organization, obviously because Belarus is much more aligned with the policies of Russia. Take the highest decision-making body, the chief executive body, is the head of State Council, which makes decision for the SCO. And does it have any permanent headquarter? The answer to that is no. So now in this context, let's try to assess what is the strategic importance of SCO for our country. First and foremost, you can actually use the quote of a very important geopolitical thinker, Henry Kissinger, who said that the SCO reflects the emerging balance where the regional powers, right, in the Eurasian region, they are actually seeking an order which is beyond the Western framework. beyond your IMF, beyond your World Bank, beyond the policies of NATO, right? So keep this in mind. Let's say, for example, very recently you guys might have read about something called as Shanti Act of 2025, under which our government is saying that we are basically going to produce 100 gigawatt of nuclear energy by the year of 2047, which is obviously a key component of our energy security, as well as a key component to actually achieve nationally determined contributions under the Paris Agreement of 2015. So for that purpose, don't you think we'll be required to upscale our nuclear energy production? And for that, what is the key component which is required? Uranium. Which country is the largest producer of uranium in the world? Kazakhstan. Or for example, let's say, don't you think copper is very much necessary to actually boost our semiconductor industry? One of the largest producer of copper, right, is none other than Uzbekistan. Or as a country, don't you think we are in a paramount need, a kind of a perpetual need of gold in our country? So you guys might have heard about something called as Kumtor mines. Kumtor mines is a very famous for the large scale gold deposit which is found in the region of Kyrgyzstan. So don't you think that we shall have a kind of a very strategic access to this Central Asian region which is, has a kind of a high availability of various critical minerals and resources? But we lack that thanks to the kind of the turbulent relationship which we have with our two dear neighbors, that is China and Pakistan. Thus, SCO basically act as a kind of a mediating tool where we can actually directly indulge with Central Asian countries to actually kind of have a direct land access or some ship access to these strategic region crossing Pakistan. For that purpose, to actually procure all of these strategic minerals, we have actually tried to establish Chabahar port in the region of Iran, right? But you guys are very well aware about the kind of the turbulent geopolitical situation which is prevailing in the West Asia as well as in the Strait of Hormuz. Thus, we can also strengthen another alternative, that is international north-south transport corridor, which starts from the region of Mumbai and crossing Iran and Azerbaijan. It actually leads us to Russia as well as the mineral reserves of Eastern Europe. For that purpose, we can actually, kind of indulge and have negotiation on pipelines, trade corridors, connectivity projects. Similarly, there is a very famous quote by Barack Obama where he said that we can choose our enemies, but as a country, we never have options to choose our neighbors. USA's very important reason for the rise of USA is also that it has got a kind of a not that much strong neighbors in the form of Mexico and Canada. But in our country, we are basically surrounded with two nuclear powered neighbors. And thus, it is very important for us to make sure a kind of a cordial relations with them and follow a Madhyam mark. And for that purpose, it is very important that it actually, the SCO platform brings India, China and Pakistan on the same platform to actually engage in various counter narratives on a kind of a diplomatic level. Then, it also acts as a kind of a very important anti-terror framework which we have created, regional anti-terror structure framework, RATS. Keep this in mind that RATS basically aims to deal with three evils which you guys can remember through a concept of CSR. C stands for counter-terrorism, S stands for separatism and R stands for regionalism, to actually neutralize such terror networks. Remember, it is a permanent organ of SCO, and unlike SCO, RATS has a permanent headquarter, right? And that is basically where? At your Tashkent in Uzbekistan. Thus, while various Western groupings you guys might be very frequently hearing of, so there is a European Union, there is your NATO, don't you think that SCO basically strengthen our country's role in non-Western grouping, right? And actually ensure that we are taking a kind of a balancing stand when it comes to geopolitics. So when we are discussing and negotiating with China, what are the issues which we face specifically when it comes to China, the prevailing issues? So obviously there is one very important issue, and that is the economical issue, where thanks to the kind of the large scale monopoly which China has when it comes to the strategic minerals, we are basically import dependent for various such strategic minerals when it comes to China. For example, 97% supply of erythromycin when it comes to antibiotics, right, to actually create active pharmaceutical ingredients for our pharmaceutical products. Electronics, 86% of the flat panels or 80% of laptops. Your renewable energy, 82% of the solar cells, 75% of the lithium ion batteries, which is basically being utilized in the various electronic vehicle. And thus the resultant of that, we end up importing almost 113 billion products from China by the month of July 2025, leading to a trade deficit close to $100 billion. Keep this in mind, the total trade deficit which we have as a country, 35% of that comes from China itself. And that's what China does. This overwhelming dominance which China has, it actually ends up turning the supply chains into a pressure tool. Just look here. Even when we are talking about our own exports, we are actually, let's say for example, if you are exporting some electronic vehicle which is manufactured in India, for that don't you think will be required lithium ion batteries, and 75% of them, 3/4 of them coming from where? Coming from China itself. So many of the time when we are actually sitting with China on the negotiating table, when we are talking and discussing about the line of actual control, China uses this import dependency of ours as a strategic tool. And that's why we have been unable to, kind of pressurize China that much significantly, as we have the kind of an leverage when it comes to the discussion with Pakistan. And this also, what is the impact of this rising trade deficit? Let's look at the article itself. China targets India's manufacturing sector. Delay the machinery delivery, pulls iPhone engineers. Many of the time, this mass-produced average quality products from China actually ends up hurting the local manufacturers. So yes, indeed, we might be having the technological advancement, let's say to create such lithium ion batteries in our country, but these mass-produced cheap lithium ion batteries are much more profitable for even the Indian manufacturers, and that's why they rely on such import. So don't you think it actually stands as an antithetical to the idea of Make in India itself? For this import of $100 billion, which basically ends up amounting to almost more than 1/3 of our total trade deficit, don't you think we are significantly paying very important foreign exchange reserve? And such drainage of foreign exchange, don't you think actually put us to the same situation which we faced in the year of 1991, where we had a balance of payment crisis? Further, the currency depreciation, right? So let's say for example, there is more demand of dollar which is being demanded by China to actually export us all of these critical things on which we are dependent on China. So basically, in comparison to dollar, obviously the demand for Indian rupee is going to decline, and thus the currency depreciation will take place, and thus the kind of the appreciation of the dollar currency will take place. So to actually procure the same product, now we are basically required to actually pay more dollar. It pushes the cost of imported goods, pushes the cost of input as well, make the product much more expensive, and thus reduce the incentive to build the domestic capacity in various key sectors. Have we taken some response to this? Yes, indeed. First and foremost, the Directive General of Trade and Remedies. The Directive General of Trade and Remedies has ensured that various imposition of anti-dumping duty on China's product is being done. To actually promote export of Indian products, various trade subsidies is being provided. To further boost the domestic manufacturing, indigenous manufacturing, we have also brought production-linked incentive scheme for more than 14 sectors. Also, we shall focus upon the China Plus Fin strategy, which is actually being adopted by various European Union countries, like for example, your Finland, Norway, various Baltic countries, etc., where they are actually trying to diversify their market. Even they don't want to be import dependent only on China's product. When they are actually kind of looking for an alternative market, this is where the idea shall be to integrate Make in India to Make for World, where we shall actually start creating products for these countries who are trying to diversify their market. Further, we can actually put further stricter quality standards on Chinese imports which are taking place in our country. Now, the major issue which has taken, kind of featured in the today's article, that is the conflict which is taking place on the border. To understand this conflict, we'll take a little bit help of the modern history. So you guys can recall a very infamous viceroy who was posted in our country, whose name was Curzon. Curzon, who was basically viceroy from the year of 1899 to 1905. And you guys might be majorly remembering him for the Swadeshi movement which took place. The same viceroy Curzon also launched a movement called as Young Husband Movement. where he fought a battle called as Battle of Lhasa in the year of 1904 with the region of Tibet, where he kind of ended up defeating the army which was raised by the Dalai Lama at that point of a time, and thus forced Dalai Lama to kind of flee from that region. Why? Because he wanted Tibet to act as a buffer if any such future Russian invasion take place. Thus, Tibet was created as a kind of a buffer state by the policies of Curzon, and through a kind of an Anglo-Chinese conference which took place in the year of 1906, this Tibet was actually given under the security to the region of China. That is why China still keeps on claiming, its authority on the region of Tibet, quoting this Anglo-Chinese Convention of 1906. So, when China got its independence in the year of 1949, its premier at that point of a time, Mao Zedong, who also had established the People's Republic of China, he basically propounded a strategy called as Five-Finger Strategy, where he basically claimed that the Indian Prime Minister, the first Indian Prime Minister Jawaharlal Nehru at that point of a time, is following nothing but a colonial legacy, where he is also trying to ensure that just like Curzon, Tibet remains nothing but a buffer state between the two large nations in the region of Asia at that point of a time, who are eventually going to become the economic powerhouse, and that is India and China. Thus, under this five-finger strategy, Mao Zedong basically claimed that the region of China is nothing but a palm, and it has 5 growing fingers in the region of Asia, that is Ladakh, Nepal, Sikkim, Bhutan, and Arunachal Pradesh. For example, you guys might have seen that even very frequently, China keep on calling this Arunachal Pradesh as their own northeastern frontier agency. So, following the same strategy, Tibet was occupied by China. The invasion of Tibet took place, and Dalai Lama fled and basically, sought exile in our country, right? So that asylum was basically provided by our Prime Minister at that point of a time, leading to the backdrop of Indo-China war, where China, if you guys can see here, so this is basically the Johnson line. This is the Johnson line, right, which was created by the Britishers in the year of 1865. This is what we follow. That yes, indeed, as per our country's official extension of our border, this is based upon the Johnson line of 1865. However, during the Indo-China war, China basically ended up capturing this much of region for us, and this is something which is called as Aksai Chin, which you guys oftenly see in the news. China ended up capturing this, and China's claim or line of 1960, which it reached in the year of 1962, and they call it as a McDonald line. Now keep this in mind that in this total region, there existed 62 very strategic patrolling stations. Through this war of Indo-China which took place in the year of 1962, we ended up losing almost 26 such strategic patrolling stations. Right now, India in this region of UT of Ladakh has almost 39 such strategic patrolling stations, where they are actually based upon various high plateaus. This height in such war field actually provides advantages in the context of reconnaissance, or for example in various maneuvering operations. So what China has done when it comes to the border negotiation, and when we talk and we try to claim our line, that is Johnson line, China basically follow a strategy called as salami slicing strategy, where it puts political pressure on us, where it tries to put these economic issues at the front, right, that how you are basically import dependent on our country, as well as they also try to put ideological warfare, where China has started establishing, if you guys can see, various villages in this region, so that in the future case, let's say for example, even if we end up invading this region, what China will do, China will go to the United Nations and they will say that see how the human right violation has been done by this country, that is India. So the China has also indulged in quantum jump in the presence, right? Various military establishment has been created. Large scale drone employment is being done there. Large scale infrastructure is being developed in this region by China. So what has been our country's response? The first and foremost is that we have tried to solve this issue through the diplomatic channels by creating the meeting of commander corps which keep on taking place. And we have put impetus on the border agreement 1993 and 2013, where we have come to the conclusion that only a peaceful and mutually acceptable settlement would resolve the border issue. At the same point of time, countering China, we are also indulging in various kind of technology upgradation which is taking place at the border, and we have also launched to create various idle villages in the bordering region under our Vibrant Village program. Through the schemes like Production Linked Incentive Scheme, Make in India Scheme, various kind of trade subsidies which is being provided, creation of special economic zones, we are also trying to basically cut down our import dependency. For example, launching a national critical mineral mission. And we are also engaging with China at multiple other forums as well, like for example, BRICS is there, G20 is there, etc. However, there are several prevailing concerns which remains. First and foremost is the strained ties with Pakistan and China which we have, as well as you guys can recall the recent Pahalgam case which took place. So we have obviously not been able to curb the cross-border terrorism. Then when we are indulging effectively with SCO, USA, European Union, G7, they basically kind of eye this SCO as a kind of an anti-West grouping. You guys can actually recall the recent sanctions by USA and Russia, right? And the growing Russia and China nexus which is taking place. Keep this in mind, SEO is very important for us because it actually, if we talk about the trade perspective, it is very important reason for us. But even then, this entire trade which we do with the SEO region is less than 10% of our total trade. And it is highly dependable upon, let's say, for example, the trade or the majority of the export market for us is what? European Union and USA. So we can also not, make it take the title of an anti-West grouping. So the effective steps which we can take is, we can actually end up launching a Central Asia policy. We can create a national currency payment for mutual trade. We can revive, right, your Tajikistan, Afghanistan, Pakistan, India, Tapi gas pipeline. We can try to further strengthen the regional anti-terror structure, as well as the secure initiative which has been launched by India to further increase the digital connectivity in the region. So these can be some pragmatic steps which can be taken by our government. Just remember them, try this question, and we move forward to the next news, where we will quickly try to learn what amounts to hate speech in our country. What is the context of the news? So the Supreme Court said that issues related to hate speech not only affects the fraternity and constitutional order, but also held that the criminal law has adequate provisions to deal with such offences, and thus left it to the Parliament to decide if any changes are necessary. Supreme Court's argument was that the existing framework of substantive criminal law, including the provisions of the Indian Penal Code and the allied legislation, that is Bharatiya Nyaya Samhita, adequately addresses acts that promote enmity, outrage religious sentiments, or disturb public tranquility. The field is therefore not unoccupied, and thus judicial intervention is not required, and thus in this case, basically, the Supreme Court did not follow judicial overreach, rather judicial restraint. So, you guys might be coming across various such headings very frequently, right? There was an issue of UPSC Jihad program which was set, which was actually banned by the government as well, but the ministry ordered that it will not expressively stop the channel from telecasting any episodes or something like that. Why? Because there is a very thin line when it exists to the term that what actually amounts to a hate speech. Keep this in mind that under Article 19 of the Constitution, you people have freedom of speech and expression. However, that can be curtailed under a limitation that if you are impacting the morality of the public as well as the public order. But what actually amounts to the disruption of public order is something which has not been exemplified in the Constitution. Thus, there exists a large-scale ambiguity. So, for example, does hate speech is defined explicitly in Indian Penal Code 1860? The answer is no. Is it defined even under Bharatiya Nyaya Samhita 2023? The answer is no. So, any formal definition about hate speech only comes from a judgment of Supreme Court. That was Pravasi Bhalai Sangathan versus Union of India 2014, in which Supreme Court held that hate speech basically entails if such a speech is enticing enmity, right, quarreling between groups based on prejudice against caste, religion, race, sexuality, etc. Why? Why such hate speech shall be considered a kind of a threat to the integrity of the country itself? Because just remember that when Britishers were ruling us, There was a Secretary of State at that point of a time, right? Secretary of State, his name was Risley. Risley made a statement. He said that there does not exist an idea of India. Why? Because it is nothing but a geographical entity which is divided on the lines of caste, race, religion, language, etc. Obviously, he was talking about the British India at that point of a time. Right now, you people obviously know that we follow the Article 51A, Clause E, according to which we shall basically promote fraternity and brotherhood among us Indians. And obviously, now there exists no issue of caste-based violence, communal violence, religious based kind of overpowering or outnumbering each other, or for example obviously there exists no issue of language imposition anymore, right? Just look at the data here, the data which has been taken from the National Crime Record Bureau. Just look at the hate speeches incidents recorded and how it has significantly increased, nearly 97% increase in hate speech incident from 2023 to 2025. 2024 witnessed a 74% increase in hate speech incidents compared to 2023. Also, there has been a continuous rise in 2025 as well. So almost 1,318 such cases in 2025 was registered. Just look how it has a spillover effect on disrupting the public order and harmony. Just look at the number of communal riots which is taking place in India, almost consistently increasing from 2022. The increase in the last 5 years has been almost 84%. Keep this in mind. So don't you think it actually ends up accounting to a kind of a socially sanctioned atrocities? In this case, you guys can recall the speech which was actually made by Suhrawardi. Suhrawardi at that point of a time was Premier of the government of Bengal. The date was specifically 14th of August 1946, where the Muslim League basically gave a call for direct action day, which led to a massacre in the region of Bengal. You guys can recall the now Khali massacre, right? And that ultimately led to what? The partition of an entire nation. So don't you think such hate speeches, which can be provocative in the nature, which can actually, kind of lead to the various multiplication of the various feelings which exist in the people themselves, that can actually come out and ultimately create a kind of a public order havoc, as well as violating the Article 21 of the Constitution, where basically who will be going to be on the receiving end? The various innocent lives, and thus kind of violating their right to dignified life. So, does there exist any specific provision to curb down such hate speech? We have already discussed that nowhere it is explicitly mentioned, but there are some indirect provisions which can actually help us to curtail hate speeches, like for example in Indian Penal Code 1860, section 153A, if there is any enmity which is being spread between different groups on different ground. 153B, assertion which is prejudicial to national integration. 295A, any deliberate attempt to outrage religious feeling. Section 125 of Representation of People Act 1951, if any politician has made such hate speech, right, to kind of increase the enmity between any group, then imprisonment of 3 years will take place. SC/ST Prevention Act 1989, for increasing enmity between such groups, imprisonment of 6 months to 5 years. Under Bharatiya Nyaya Samhita 2023, the same provisions has also been included, and such provisions are basically penalized, as well as section 196 and 197 also includes the electronic communication. So for example, even if any person has tweeted and that person is basically kind of spreading enmity between any different group, then that person can be charged under section 196 of Bharatiya Nyaya Samhita. Bharatiya Nyaya Samhita 2023 specifically includes mob lynching, where section 103 defines mob lynching and also provides for capital punishment of any such culprit. What can be the steps which can be taken? So first and foremost, under 266 7th Law Commission's report, it said that hate speech can actually be considered as a valid restriction on Article 19 of Freedom of Speech and Expression. Second, Bayes Barua Committee specifically suggested for criminalization of hate speech, that the legal responsibility of politicians shall be held when they are giving speeches, specifically in the charged atmosphere of election campaigns. Fourth, ensure the prevalence of idea of Ek Bharat Shresth Bharat. And as a citizen, at the end of the day, the best thing which we can do is to follow our fundamental duty to spread fraternity and brotherhood. Article 51A, and that is a fundamental duty as well. We move forward to the next news, where we'll quickly learn about some very important stupas, keeping in mind the prelims examination. So what is the context of news? US authorities have announced the return of 657 antiquities, collectively valued at nearly $14 million. The pieces were recovered pursuant to several ongoing investigations into the criminal trafficking networks, including those of alleged antiquities traffickers like Subhash Kapoor and convicted trafficker, that is Nancy Weiner. So what is Indian Antiquities and Art Treasure Act 1972 tells us? What is antiquity? Antiquity basically includes coins, sculptures, paintings, epigraphs, manuscripts, etc. But they shall be at least 100 years old, and it also covers various movable cultural property. The export of antiquity is completely prohibited? No. Is prohibited except if license has been provided by the government to actually curb down what? Illegal export, unlicensed trade and non-registration. Who is the implementing authority for the Indian Antiquities and Art Treasure Act of 1972? That is nothing but the Archaeological Survey of India, which was established in the year of 1861 by a person whose name is you people will comment in the comment box. Who established Archaeological Survey of India in the year of 1861? Okay. Coming to, very recently there was also kind of a Piprahava relics, which was actually brought back to Delhi. So just try to understand a very simple story. Okay. The year is 483 BC, right? And we are basically here referring to a text called as Buddhist text called as Mahavamsa. So in 483 BC, okay, Buddha basically ended up achieving Mahaparinirvana, or basically he died. And he died at which place? At Kushinagar. So at that point of time when Buddha died, his body was basically cremated and his relics were basically put in a kind of a stupa. Okay? When Buddha's birth was where? So his birth was, he basically belonged to a Shakya clan. How we get to know about this? Because Ashoka himself tells us this information. So he basically erected a pillar called as Lumbini pillar inscription, also called as Rummendei pillar, in which he specifically says that Shakya Muni, a term which appeared in your prelims examination also, was born here. So Buddha basically belonged to Shakya clan. Shakya were ruling at that point of a time a region of Kapilvastu. So when they got to know that Buddha has died, where in Kushinagar, and he has been basically cremated by the Mallas, and they are in the position of the Chitta of Buddha, they basically sent a message to the Mallas and they said that we want the relics. Similarly, at that point of a time, who is ruling? Ajat Shatru. Which region? Magadh. Which dynasty he belonged to? Haranaka dynasty. He also said that, even I want, right? I want the share of relics. So basically a fight took place at that point of a time, right? Leading to the distribution of the Gautam Buddha Chitta or relics in various parts. So these original stupas, which contained originally the relics or the Chitta of the Gautam Buddha, they are called as Shararik stupas. When Ashoka will come and will convey the third Buddhist council, he will basically start erecting these original Shararik stupas and will end up creating 84,000 stupas in process. All the original Shararik stupa has been listed here, which were in the possession of Mallas of Kushinagar, Ajat Shatru of Magadh, Lichvi of Vaishali, Shakyas of Kapilvastu, Bullis of Alagappa, Mallas of Pava, Koliyas of Ramgram and Brahman of Vedpith. There was a Don Brahman whose name was Don, who basically mediated between all the parties. Okay? This is your Piprahava Stupa. As per the Mahaparinibana Sutta, the cremation of Buddha takes place in 483 BC. So the fight takes place between Shakyas of Kapilvastu and Mallas of Kushinagar. Thus, this Piprahava also contains a stone casket containing the Chitta of Buddha, where we also get an inscription. The inscription is Sukiti Bhatinam Shakyana, or how this particular relics or stupa belongs to the Shakya brothers. It was excavated in the year of 1898 by a British planter whose name was William Claxton Pepe. Take. So in this context, remember the Piprahava stupa. One more stupa which you shall remember, that is Dhamik stupa. Where it is? In Sarnath. This is the place where Buddha, after attaining Nirvana, so he got Nirvana at a place called as Uruvela. Now you people know that place name as Bodh Gaya. right? So when he got nirvana, enlightenment at Bodh Gaya, he basically wandered and came to a place at that point of a time, okay, which was at that point of a time was called as Rishi Patna, modern day Sarnath. And there was a park. The park name was Mrigdaya, or you guys know it now as a deer park. Here he met his first 5 followers: Kaudinya, Bhadrika, Vashpa, Ashwajit, and Mahanaman. And to them, he basically taught the Astangika mark. First sermon. This is your Dhamik Stupa. Why? Because the moment he gave them the sermon or taught them about Astangika mark, before this, what was the tradition which was followed by majority of the people? Vedic tradition. And it transitions into what? Shaman tradition. And thus an event takes place. That is Dharma Chakra Parvartana, a new dharma which was basically established by Gautam Buddha. Take. If UPSC asks you which is the world's tallest stupa, that is your Kesariya stupa. Take. Remember this. Also, another important stupa, that is a UNESCO World Heritage Site, Sachi stupa. Take. Where? In Vidisha, MP. Built by Ashoka in bricks, destroyed by Pushyamitra Shunga, who also killed the last Maurya ruler Bredarth in the year of 185 BC, right? Then his son himself, Agnimitra Shunga, basically reconstructed the entire Sachi Stupa, now by the stones, and that's why it even preserves today. Remember that it was Agnimitra Shunga who added the gateway or the Toranas, right, in Sachi Stupa. So remember these specific terms also: Harmika, Anda, Medhi, Vedika, and Torana. What are these? These are basically architectural features related to Buddhism. And we move forward to the next news, where we'll quickly learn some important facts which can appear in your prelims related to the pharmaceutical industry, right? What is the context? So the Future Career Conservation series has organized by an SRM institute, right, as well as the Hindu newspaper, which will host the 6th webinar on pharma innovation, regulation, and the rise of India. With advancements in drug discovery, growing focus on research and development, integration of digital health, and shifting the regulatory frameworks, the webinar will end up unpacking these changes mean for the industry. So, a very quick outlook on India's pharma industry. Is our country the 3rd largest in the terms of value of pharmaceutical products? No, volume. And 11th largest in the terms of value. Currently, our country has more than 3,000 pharmaceutical companies and more than 10,000 drug manufacturing facilities, where we end up accounting for more than 20% of the global pharmaceutical supply and produce 60% of the global demand for vaccine, where we sell pharmaceutical products to more than 200 countries, and our country has the title of the highest number of United Nations approved plants outside USA. So in 2025 itself, the pharmaceutical industry's export amounted for approximately $30 billion. And the projection is that by the year of 2030 itself, it is going to reach $130 billion. Thus, by the year of 2047, the pharmaceutical industry itself will actually turn into a $1 trillion industry. Now, this is your increasing pharmaceutical market. India's pharmaceutical market, if you can actually see by the year of 2047. Just look at India's drug and pharmaceutical export, which has been consistently on the rise. However, recently we have faced a setback. The setback is that USA, which is also our country's largest market for pharmaceutical product, almost 34% of our total export actually is exported to USA. It has ended up announcing a 100% tariff on the imported pharma products. Keep this in mind. However, our government has taken various steps to boost pharmaceutical sector. Like for example, the production linked incentive scheme for the generation of complex generics and high value added medicine. 100% FDI is allowed in pharmaceutical sector through automatic route. We are creating bulk drug parks for specialized industrial zones, right? The National Institute for the Research in Pharmaceutical Sector is actually conducting advanced research in biopharma and to actually create repurposed drug. The Central Drug Standard and Control Authority is now actually the kind of authority to get non-objection certificate for exports from zonal office as well. And there is a specific section 83 of the Indian Patent Act which aims to promote the innovations in the industry. Keep these schemes and initiatives in your mind, and we move forward to the next news, where we'll quickly try to learn about Employees Provident Fund Organization. Why it has been in the news? Because of the launch of a new portal. So in an attempt to resolve the long pending issue of unclaimed deposits, the Employees Provident Fund Organization is now set to launch a portal for the members to access their inoperative accounts through Aadhaar based authentication. The name of the portal is going to be PRAAPTI, that is EPF Aadhaar based access portal for tracking inoperative accounts specifically. Keep this in mind. So it is going to be helpful for those employees provident fund members who do not have any universal account number and have EPF accounts only in a physical mode. What it will facilitate? It will lead to identification, tracking, universal account number linking, and activation of the old EPF accounts, thus reducing manual intervention, minimizing documentation, and enhancing the transparency. As per EPFO, there exist 31 lakh inoperative accounts. So even if the people have reached to the maturity age of 58 years, they have not withdrawn their amount. 31 lakh inoperative accounts are there, and almost 41% of them are lying idle for 5 to 10 years. Now, in the year of fiscal year 2026 itself, through these various reforms and digitalization, EPFO has been able to achieve a record claim settlement of 8.31 crore employees. Coming to what is EPFO? EPFO is a provident fund, a pension scheme, or an insurance scheme. It specifically deals with organized sector where the establishment has a minimum of 20 employees, and it is administered under the Employees Provident Act of 1952. Okay? Keep this in mind. Let's say, for example, if I want to avail the features of EPFO, what I will do? There will be at least an equal contribution which will be made by employee and the employer. The interest will be offered on the accumulated fund, and there will be no tax reduction under the Income Tax Act of 1961. Keeping in mind, let's say apply it in a case study. So let's say there is Tom. Tom shall be working in an organization which has at least more than 20 members for a minimum period of 6 months. Then the Tom will start contributing 12% of its total salary. His boss, Jerry, will also contribute 12%, or the organization will also contribute 12%. The total amount which will be accumulated at the end, they will basically be attracting an interest rate. Does there exist any limitations on the withdrawal? Yes. If you are retiring from the services after attaining the age of 58 years, right? So at least you should be having the EPFO account for at least a time period of till 58 years. Or if you have taken a kind of a pre-retirement before the age of 58, but retire on the account of permanent incapacity. Or if you are already covered under any social security agreement, which is nothing but a bilateral agreement between India and any other country, which is a reciprocal arrangement, generally provides for the avoidance of double coverage. And keep this in mind that India already has implemented such social security agreements with various countries like Belgium, Germany, Switzerland, France, Finland, Austria, etc. Keep these facts in your mind, and we move forward to the next news, where we'll try to learn about a new exercise which has actually featured in the news. So India and Sri Lanka reaffirmed their growing maritime partnership by conducting the 4th edition of bilateral diving exercise, that is India-Sri Lanka DIVEX 2026, where in Colombo, where the Indian submarine INS Nirakshak actually participated, providing diving support and submarine rescue vehicle to actually enhance operational coordination and focused on various kind of complex underwater operation. The highlight feature as per the news was the conduct of mixed gas dives of the Colombo over the World War era wrecks. Also, this was basically a kind of an highlight to the Indian peacekeeping force which has been stationed where in Colombo, and it is aligned with the larger Mahasagar vision. So these are all the important exercises, military, navy and air force exercises which has been in the news recently and which can appear in your prelims examination. Like for example, Yuddha Abhyas, an army exercise with USA. Vajra Prahar, army exercise with USA. Or for example, Shakti, army exercise with France. Ajay Warrior, army exercise with UK. Hand in hand, obviously, with our dear neighbor China. Who is our Mitra who provides us power also? Sri Lanka. From where the sun rises from the east and the country towards our northeast is Nepal. The Malabar exercise which we do with Quad, because so many countries, so obviously so much mal we have, so much money we have. Varun, air exercise, navy exercise with France. Konkan is also a navy exercise which we do with UK, which you guys can see in the news here. Simbex we do with Singapore. Srinex with Sri Lanka. Samudra Shakti with Indonesia. Cope India with USA and Japan as an observer, and Veer Guardian with Japan. And remember, all of these important exercises which has featured in the news. And with this, we have reached to the end of our discussion today. Do not forget to attempt the questions at the end of the video and test your knowledge. We will meet in a very interesting discussion very soon. Till then, all the very best for your preparation and thank you.